There's someone behind you too. So I went around today and I was asking everybody that we work with how many planets are in our solar system. About 15% of the people that we work with came to the conclusion that there are 9 planets still. We were all growing up, we were taught that there were 9. Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Saturn, Jupiter, Uranus, and Neptune, and Pluto. But that's no longer true. So after this speech, I'm going to need you guys to go help me square everybody away that we work with here. I'm Jonathan Bird, and today we're going to talk about how we came to know Pluto, and then how it was declassified as a planet to a dwarf planet. First, I'm going to talk about the history of Pluto. Second, why it's not a planet anymore. And third, even though it's no longer a full-size planet and now it's a dwarf planet, it's still a fascinating rock out there. I've always been fascinated with astronomy. Some of my sources are a Business Insider video hosted by Neil deGrasse Tyson, information provided by the International Astronomical Union. Basically, this union gets with all these space agencies across the world and basically validates and safeguards information. And a paper by Tornos on the Kuiper Belt. Let's start with the history of Pluto. In 1906, Percival Lowell was in search of this planet X. There was this planet somewhere far out there that was having some sort of effect on Neptune and Uranus's orbit. There's a wobble in it. So they didn't know what it was, so they theorized that there was a planet out there. In 1930, Clyde Tombaugh actually discovered Pluto while he was searching for this planet X. It wasn't actually planet X because Pluto was much too small to have an effect on Uranus and Neptune's orbit. It was named by an 11-year-old. She was fascinated with Greek mythology, and Pluto was so far out there, it was dark, cold. She said, why would anybody want to go there? So it's sort of like the underworld. So Pluto was named after the god of the underworld. In 1978, Pluto's first moon was discovered, Charon. And then in 1979 and 1999, did you know that Pluto is actually closer to us than Neptune for 20 years? And that is going to happen again in about another 200 years. In 2005, Nixon Hydra, 2 more moons were discovered. And then 2006, Aries was discovered out in the Kuiper Belt, which was thought to be larger than Pluto. And due to that, they started to question, are these actually planets out there or something else? So in 2006, Pluto ended up getting downgraded. No longer a planet, now it's a dwarf planet. 2011 and 2012, 2 more moons were found on Pluto, Kerberos and Styx. And then in July 2015, the New Horizons spacecraft mission flew past Pluto, taking the first ever high-definition photos of that area. Now that we know how we came to know Pluto, let's talk about why we changed our minds about what it is. So why is Pluto a dwarf planet and not a planet? On 21 June 2015, the International Astronomical Union, they all came together finding that this new planet, or new dwarf planet Aries, they want to talk about what defines a planet. Because are we just going to keep adding planet after planet when we find more and more in the Kuiper Belt? So they all got together and decided on 3 things to define a planet. It needs to orbit a star, which Pluto did. It needs to have enough mass to make it a sphere, to create a circle, which Pluto does that. And lastly, it needs to be large enough to clear its neighborhood of other objects. So it needs to be large enough to, in its orbit, clear out all the other junk in there, which Pluto does not do that. It's part of the Kuiper Belt. There's thousands of objects out there. So that one, not mean that third criteria is why Pluto was downgraded. Neil deGrasse Tyson makes us feel better about Pluto being downgraded in a video by Business Insider by giving us examples of how insignificant Pluto really is. So if you were to move Pluto closer to where the Earth is, it's made mostly of ice and rock. So all that water would start to evaporate and Pluto would grow a tail. That's not very planet-like. Planets don't have tails. Comets have tails. Earth's moon has 5 times more mass than Pluto. And then if you look at Neptune and if that was a Chevy Impala, Pluto is actually the size of a Matchbox car. So that sort of gives you an idea of how insignificant Pluto really is compared to the size of our planets. Although Pluto was downgraded to a dwarf planet, it's still a very interesting object out there. A lot of the water that we have here on Earth came from icy rocks, just like Pluto in the Kuiper Belt, that came here during the late heavy bombardment. Charnow states in a paper about the Kuiper Belt, understanding the Kuiper Belt formation and evolution thus informs our interpretation of evolutionary process in other planetary systems. So we can look at Pluto and look at the Kuiper Belt, and they're like little planet embryos of how planets started to form but never quite got there. So we can learn a lot of how we got here in the planets by looking at the Kuiper Belt and Pluto. New Horizons passed in 2015 and got some very spectacular photos and information from Pluto. It was confirmed that Pluto has plate tectonics, very similar to Earth. So they have plates that shift. They have chirovolcanoes, which are basically ice volcanoes that spew liquid nitrogen or methane instead of volcanic lava. So let's review. We went over a brief history of Pluto, why it's no longer a planet and now called a dwarf planet, and why it's still a valuable piece of information that we can learn from to study the past. So don't be sad that Pluto is no longer a dwarf planet, because it used to be, you know, the runt of the mix. You know, it was the smallest of all the planets, sort of way out there, sort of forgotten about. But now Pluto, since it's a dwarf planet, now it's the biggest, baddest of the dwarf planets out in the Kuiper Belt. So it went from the smallest thing to the largest thing by being called a dwarf planet. Can we rescan the audience, please?